Good morning, I'm Caroline Fisher. I'm an Assistant Professor of Journalism here at the University of Canberra, and I'm filling in for the Vice-Chancellor, Deep Saini. This morning I'm here to talk to Michelle Grattan about a huge week in politics. Michelle, we've had a big budget week and it ended last night with Bill Shorten's budget and reply speech. He made some big statements about health and tax. Can you outline what you think those big points were and how do you think they'll be received by voters?
On health, he's made a big announcement that Labor would spend $2.3 billion, essentially slashing the out-of-pocket costs for cancer patients. Now, I think that'll go down well. I can't see it actually being a major election issue because I don't think the Liberals will want to attack it too directly. They'll want to say, well, we're doing a lot. Maybe they'll want to try and match bits and pieces of it, but it's not the sort of thing that you make too partisan. But the voters will think, yes, give Bill Shorten a tick for that. Now, the other thing he did was to formalise Labor's position on the first tranche of the income tax cuts. And in this case, I think Labor's been very clever. It's ticked off on those tax cuts, but it's improved them for the very low income earners. So in a way that neutralises the big centrepiece of the budget. It is true that Labor opposes the second and third rounds of those tax cuts, and that's really where the big money is. But I don't know that it'll be marked down for that for a couple of reasons. One is those cuts are well into the distant future, and the second is that they increasingly favour the very wealthy. So I think on tax, Shorten at the moment has put himself in a very competitive position, at least on income tax. Now, in an overall sense on taxation, he is vulnerable because Labor would have a higher level of tax. But on income tax, he's been quite tactically savvy.
Though you say that he might be a bit vulnerable on other tax policies, it seems to me that his framing is sort of, yes, higher taxing, but higher spending budget.
Well, that's right. But nevertheless, he's open to a scare campaign, for example, on the so-called retirement tax, as the coalition dubs it, the changes to the franking policy. So there's no doubt that he will have to fight hard to justify those rises along the very lines you mentioned, that this gives us greater flexibility to spend in important areas like helping cancer patients.
And what about negative gearing? I mean, potentially he's vulnerable on that too, or do you think that will be so popular with younger voters that could, cancel out?
I think it will be popular with younger voters, and I think that one of the features of this election actually is that it's a generational election, that the baby boomers have different interests to younger people, and there'll be a generational split in voting for that reason. Negative gearing, though, is dicey for another reason, and that is when it was announced, which was before the last election, housing prices were going up. Now they're going down, and therefore the question arises, what effect will this have on the market? We know that there is concern about the fall in house prices in a wider economic sense. So it's a policy that has more questions now than when it was originally announced.
So following the government's budget, Josh Frydenberg's budget, the following morning he did make quite a sudden change in relation to the energy assistance payment on Newstart. It appeared a bit ad hoc, and it's a big spend of $80 million. But did he have any choice to do that?
I don't think he did because, well, it was a collective decision. It was not just Frydenberg, but also, of course, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister. But what was driving this was the legislation needed to get through for that energy supplement to go out to welfare recipients. And there was only about a day to get it through. Clearly, the members of the House of Representatives, the non-government members, wanted it extended to New Start people and other similar benefits, the youth allowance, for example. They would have had the numbers to amend it because, of course, the government's in a minority in the House. So the government thought, well, best to do it ourselves rather than have this forced on us. And therefore, that accounted for that quick decision. They were a bit reluctant to admit that, but Josh Frydenberg did let it slip at his post-budget lunch.
So you mentioned before that you thought that perhaps Labor may have neutralised, the government's tax cuts.
The income tax.
The tax cuts. And the government, was trumpeting the fact that they're bringing the budget back into the black. Do you think then that tax is going to remain a key battleground, or do you think that they really have successfully neutralised it?
I think tax will remain a central issue because the government's overarching scare campaign is that Labor's the big taxing party, and so it'll be these other tax issues that will be very toughly fought. I think all through the campaign. So
the election is clearly imminent. Do you think that the budget and the budget reply are going to have much play in the community? Have voters made up their minds? Are they listening?
Well, the government needed the budget to really change the conversation, to kickstart its election campaign. I don't think it's got the horsepower to do that. I think that it was a benign budget. Economists seem to think it was pretty economically responsible. It's pushing out quite a lot of money, but the economy's been slowing, and so a bit of stimulus is not a bad thing. The cash splash can have a wider positive economic effect. But I don't think it's a budget of imagination, and I don't think the public in general are listening. I think that many people just want the election over, and quite a lot just want the back of this government. Now, campaigns can change things, there's no doubt about that, and scare campaigns can be potent, but nevertheless, as we sit here today on the brink of this election being announced, whether it's in the next day or two or even a bit later, but we are on the brink of it. Labor goes into the campaign in a strong position. This is its election to lose, and the government has an uphill fight.
Thanks very much, Michelle. We've got a lot to look forward to.
Thanks, Caroline.